Hello, I've come to the coast today to review the new Fujifilm X-T3. There's been loads of new camera releases recently. Two things, the reviews are all very similar. They tell you about the stats. And they're great, but that's not what this review is about. I'm getting out and doing some landscape photography, and you never see reviewers doing landscape photography. And the Fujifilm X-T3 is something I think landscape photographers like me are going to be very interested in. I wanted to check it out, I wanted to review it, so I have bought this camera with my own money, and my intention is to keep it if it fits the bill for what I need it to do. So the Fujifilm X-T3 has a 26 megapixel APS-C cropped sensor, and today I'm going to be using that with the Fujinon 16 to 55mm lens, which is a very nice lens, so I know I'm getting good image quality out of that lens today. Let's finish shooting this time lapse, which the Fujifilm X-T3 does have an interval timer built in, which is very nice for your time lapses. But once that's finished, I'm going to pack up and we're going to take some photographs. Okay, so I'm set up for my first shot of the day with the Fuji X-T3, and I am at what they call the drinking dinosaur, and it's a very classic shot, and I just think it's a good way to test a camera when you take a composition that you're familiar with. And I am quite familiar with this one. I did workshops here, I've shot it a few times myself, and it's just a really nice scene to photograph. For the composition, today I'm trying two things. I'm going to go quite in close on the dinosaur itself, and then do one a bit further away that gets a bit of the cliffs in there. I'm going to use the opportunity also to use a long exposure. I have my composition set, and one thing that I really like with this camera is that it has a touch screen, unlike the X-T2, with a couple of really nice swipe features when you are composing using the live view. Firstly, if you just do a quick swipe down, you get the spirit level on there, and it does Z-axis and it does the X-axis as well. So you get to make sure you've got a nice straight and level shot in whichever way you want. If you then swipe up, you get a full RGB histogram, which is really nice. You can set a small histogram on there to be permanently on there, but just with a quick swipe up, you can see the full RGB histogram, which I just think is a really nice feature, and you can tell that Fuji are thinking about the photographer with this camera. Settings wise, I'm at f8 for this, 1/100th of a second shutter speed, and ISO, which is the base ISO for this camera, which is 160. And then going to, because it's a long exposure, just attach my 10-stop filter to the front. This is thankfully, with this lens, it's the same filter thread as my Canon lens. So just screw that on. And another nice thing, even in the live view, when you put it in to T mode, which is the timer, or the time mode, you can see through that 10-stop filter on the live view here, which is another really nice thing to have. I don't think my Canon can do that, certainly I haven't tried for a while. So I can then just tap in F14, I'm just going to go actually F11, 30 seconds, ISO 160, and then just hit the shutter button. No messing around with exposure calculators or anything like that. With that 10-stop filter, it will just see straight through it, and that's rather nice. One little thing that's a bit frustrating with the long exposure mode of this camera, with the timer particularly, is that it only does 10-stop increments. So if you are a third or a half stop away from where you need to be, you're going to struggle with that. And when you start to do the extreme long exposures, that becomes a problem. I would have to go into bulb mode, use a shutter release cable, and do it manually. So it's a small thing, but I've become accustomed to it on my camera, and it's missing from this one. Right, so let's have a look at that. Now it's exposed. Yeah, that's really nice. I've got the top of the dinosaur just on the horizon line, which I think is a really nice touch. I can see through the archway there, down to the tide, which is going out at the moment. And yeah, nice start to the day with a couple of really nice features that this Fuji just makes. It makes it much easier to capture some of these sort of medium level long exposure shots. Very nice. Happy with that. mention a few of the features that I really like about this camera. Firstly, the look and the feel of it. What's wrong with a camera looking cool? We like our phones and some of the Apple stuff that we buy to be appealing to the eye, so why can't your camera? And in this silver version, you can get a black one as well, but this silver version just looks really, really nice. It is also very, very solidly built. It's a slightly better build quality than the X-T2, and it just feels really solid and chunky in the hand. You can also get a battery grip as well, which I would recommend if you're going to be hand holding it at weddings and things like that, but for landscape photography, it's just really nice. It also has the dials on the top there, if you can see them. It just gives a really nice manual feel to what you're doing. I wouldn't use it if I was hand holding, but when the camera's on the tripod and I'm doing landscape photography, I can look down at the camera, use these dials to tweak my settings. Next up, the image quality is also excellent. I've been using this camera for a couple of weeks now, and the image quality is on a par to anything else in this price range. Autofocus is also really nice. It's quick, it's fast. That's for stills. For video as well now, they have upgraded the autofocus for this. It tracks my eye, tracks my face, and so far it seems to be doing pretty well. What it doesn't do, it's not quite as good as the Canon dual pixel autofocus. It doesn't track an object that isn't a face, which the Canons do. And that's just something that I often use for those kind of landscape shots with bushes and things in the foreground. So just a minor thing, but still good autofocus all round. Just going outside of landscape photography for a minute, the video features on this camera are amazing. Absolutely brilliant for this price point, just stunning. You get 4K at 60p, which is amazing. It outputs a really high quality video as well, and it captures 10-bit video in camera as well. What it's also good for is at 1080p, you can do 120 frames per second, which gives you that really nice slow motion, smooth footage. So just top-notch video features. It does F-log as well, so you can do lots in post-production. And all the video that you see that doesn't have this camera in it today is shot on this camera. Right, with that out of the way, we are getting towards the end of the day now, so hopefully I'm going to get a little bit of colour in the skies today. So I'm going to go and find a really nice location to hopefully capture a bit of a sunset. Right, I'm set up for my second shot, and I'm in a bit of a precarious position. As you can see, I've already got the camera set up right on this little precipice. I'm just walking across some extremely slippery rocks. This is probably not the best idea, and I definitely don't recommend it, but I do have the tide times. The tide is coming in, but I'm at this position here, and it's just making a beautiful scene. The camera is set up and it's on a vertical and just shooting through this little gap here, and it just looks fantastic. I've got the rock there that's acting like a bit of an island right in the middle of the frame. I've got the water going either side of it into the sea in the distance. That's, as I say, the tide is coming in and it's quite rough, and it's just coming down this channel really nicely. I'm cutting out the sides of the cliff just to focus on these rocks here. Really happy with the composition. I've now got some colour developing in the sky as well, and again I'm doing a long exposure. This Fujifilm, I love the way you can use the sort of exposure simulation. It works really, really well. I've got the 10-stop filter on there again, and it also sort of, as you put it into timer mode, it kind of guesses what the shutter speed needs to be. So I've did an exposure at about 1/8 of a second without the filter on there, and then I put the filter on and it just adjusted the timer to what it thought was the right exposure, and it did pretty well. And that was 2 minutes, probably a little bit dark. I'd like to up it another third of a stop, but that's not to worry. I really like the manual controls of this camera. It's on a vertical, so let's bring you around that way. So for this one, I've switched to f11, and you're just using this dial on the lens to bring in f11, and it just, when you're doing a landscape and you've got a little bit of time like I do now, it just works really well. You've then got the ISO here. I've got that set at the base ISO, which is 160, and then it's just a case of adjusting your shutter speed to get your exposure right, or if you put it on auto, you're then in aperture priority mode and you've got an exposure compensation there, but I'm just doing it totally manual using that for the shutter speed. And like I said, I was at 1/8 of a second until I've put the 10 stop filter on the front again here, which is then giving me a 2-minute exposure. And I think what I'm going to do is just up the ISO a little bit. Let's just bring you around and let's go to 200, bit dark still, maybe one more. And then I've got the 2-second timer on the tripod, ready to shoot. 2 seconds, there we go. And then I'm just going to wait 2 minutes for that to expose. Hopefully, I do still have 2 minutes before the tide kind of comes and gets me. I'm on a bit of an outcrop here and it's lower back towards the beach, so there is a chance of me getting cut off, but I am going to be sensible and I am going to get back before that happens. But wow, so yeah, I mean, I've never been when the tide has been this low, so I'm pretty excited about this shot because it's something a bit more unique to what I've captured here before. But yes, really nice, really happy with what I'm getting here. Let's wait just a few more seconds and we'll see what that looks like. Well, that just goes to show you do have to be careful because the water must have come over a lip because it suddenly got much deeper. On the verge of getting cut off, but I'm safe now. I think I'm back. So let's see if I can show you that image. I just had to pick it up right at the last second. Oh yes, look at that. That's looking great. Here we go. Let's talk a couple of little negatives. They're not even negatives really, just things that could be improved on this camera. And first off, the screen still isn't to my liking. I prefer a flip out screen, obviously because I'm a vlogger. Also though, I just think this feels a bit flimsy. The flip out screens hit every direction possible. This one doesn't. Small thing for most people, but I don't see why all cameras can't just have flip screens because they do everything as far as I'm concerned. Secondly is this little notch here where the strap goes. I find when I've got my finger on the shutter, that just gets in the way. I don't know if you can see that there, but that's just going to be, if I'm using it all day handheld, that's going to be digging into my finger. And sometimes for landscape photography, I am using a camera handheld. Another thing, it's not really landscape photography related, but it's quite difficult flicking between settings and modes, because if I want to go from doing a landscape picture to doing a video, it takes a while to fiddle around with the settings. There isn't any custom modes like there is on my Canon 5D Mark IV, where you just turn one knob and you can change an entire thing of settings. So I can go from doing handheld to bang onto the tripod to shooting movies, doing slow-mo. I can set those custom modes to however I want. This does have a lot of custom settings. It may be that I just haven't figured it out yet, but as far as I can tell, there isn't a way just to flick one button and have a completely different set of exposure settings and things like that. And that is something I think this camera is missing. Probably the main thing I think it's missing from a landscape photography perspective is the fact that it is a cropped sensor. Now, I would like to see a full frame sensor on the camera I'm using for my landscapes, but it's still a great camera, it's still a great sensor, and you're going to get great pictures with that. It's just, there is better out there. With all these criticisms though, and they're very, very minor criticisms because I love this camera, and when you bear in mind that it costs £1,300 or dollars in the US, it is exceptional value for money. And the image quality you're getting, the build quality you're getting, all those amazing video features, the fact it takes great pictures, it's so much of a camera for £1,300. And if I had this camera when I first started out, my goodness, I would have done some things with this camera. It's pretty much an all-rounder camera, a bit like the Canon 5D Mark IV. That's kind of what I've been comparing it against because I use that, and it comes up very, very close and exceeds the Canon 5D Mark IV in pretty much everything, apart from not having a full-frame sensor. As landscape photographers, even though primarily we don't need a lot of features in our camera, it is nice to know that the camera that you've got, should you choose to do so, can do portraits, you can take pictures of your family, you can do a little bit of video of your grandkids if that's something that you might do, you can do a little bit of macro. It just covers, it's just such a great all-rounder that having the knowledge that it can do that on top of your landscape stuff, I think for most people that it will be important, so you don't need to go away and buy another little compact camera or something else on top of your main landscape camera. Is it going to replace my Canon 5D Mark IV? Probably not at the moment, but I am probably going to use it as well as that. But yeah, it's incredible. I think if you're in the market for just one camera and your budget's around 1500, this is probably the one to go for. You don't need full frame in the vast majority of circumstances. Fuji understand that because they've gone with this as a cropped sensor camera. There's no full frame really in their mirrorless lineup, and then it's a jump to that sort of medium format. And I can see it kind of makes sense why they've done that, because if image quality is the thing, then you go for the medium format. If everything else is your thing, then go for this. It's a lot cheaper. You don't particularly need the full frame on a lot of occasions, and it's just a great, great camera. I think, in fact, this is the best crop sensor camera on the market by far. Those video features, the quality, just the tactile feel of it as well. I wasn't expecting to like it so much, actually. It's kind of, it's kind of blown me away, if I'm honest. It's not perfect for £1,300, it's not gonna be, but for the vast majority of people, it probably is. So yeah, great camera. The lighthouse light is now on. That's pretty much it. How's the low light video performance? Anyway, subscribe, like, let me know what you think, and I'll see you on another one very, very soon. I'm Adam. This is First Man Photography, out.